My name is Layla. I'm 29, and everyone in my life can't decide whether I'm the most mature person they know or completely insane. I can't decide either. The words hit me like a lightning strike. We got married too young. I need a life you can't give me. Jason's voice was calm, almost clinical, but I felt my heart lurch. And then, as if to make it all surreal, his ex, Brianna Walsh, the woman who had left him years ago only to return like a storm, was suddenly part of this equation. I smiled, or at least tried to, as if the universe had a cruel sense of irony. Hope you're happy, I thought. Sign the divorce papers, let him go. Months later, the FBI, a scam, and a single phone call revealed a world I couldn't have imagined. Jason and I had been married for 8 years, together since we were 19. High school sweethearts who believed young love could conquer anything, who somehow made it last in a small Ohio town. I'm an electrician. Jason manages a retail store. We built what I thought was a solid, if routine, life together. Steady, predictable, safe. Then Brianna came back. 3 months ago, Jason's ex from high school returned to town. Brianna Walsh, blonde, confident, a force that never stopped moving forward, now arrived with Teslas in her driveway, designer clothes, endless chatter about cryptocurrency and real estate. A massive house on the edge of town, parties where wine cost more than my monthly paycheck. At first, Jason seemed merely curious about reconnecting. Ran into her at the grocery store, caught up, came home with stories about her success. I trusted him, I really did. But slowly, day by day, something shifted. He started mentioning her constantly, her trips to Europe, investment advice, the life he imagined she could have given him. 2 weeks ago, he sat me down. Layla, I need to be honest about something I've been thinking about. I braced myself. I guess Brianna was involved. I was right, but not the way I expected. I think we got married too young, he said. I think we both did. We never experienced being single adults, never dated other people, never figured out who we are independently. The words crashed over me. Are you saying you want to see other people? I asked, voice tight. I want a divorce. 8 years of marriage. Gone. Just like that. Is this about Brianna? He denied it at first, said it was about personal growth, about never wanting to wake up at 40, regretting missed experiences. But his eyes betrayed him. I see how she's living, how much she's accomplished, and I realize I've never tried to see what I'm capable of. I told him I'd agree to the divorce. If you're not happy, we should both be free. His stare was blank, incredulous. You're not going to fight for our marriage? I shook my head. I can't fight for someone who doesn't want to stay. Friends called me foolish. My brother Cale called me an idiot. My mom kept asking why I gave up so easily. But I'd watched my parents fight a bitter divorce for 2 years when one of them had already left emotionally. You can't love someone into staying if they've decided to go. Jason moved out last week. He's staying with Brianna now, and the whole town is buzzing. Part of me wondered if I should have fought harder. Another part knows. When someone needs convincing to stay, the answer is already written. I still remember the first time I met Jason, like it was etched into the corners of my memory. I was 17, clutching a stack of textbooks, and he was leaning against a locker with that lazy, crooked smile that somehow made my knees weaken. It was high school. Small town Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business before they even do. And yet, despite that, amidst the chaos of cafeteria chatter and football games, we found each other. We were inseparable in the years that followed, our young love full of reckless energy and unspoken promises, the kind of love that makes you believe the world bends around your happiness. We went to the same parties, studied together under dim dormitory lights, whispered secrets during long drives through quiet country roads. I never imagined this love would become routine. I just knew it was ours, and that was enough. By the time we graduated high school, we were already dreaming of a life together. Dreams of marriage, of a small home filled with laughter and late-night conversations, of stability we thought we craved. We married at 19, right after college. Some people told us we were too young, that we didn't know ourselves yet, but we laughed, hand in hand, believing in our shared story, in the foundation we'd built together. Jason was always steady, predictable in a comforting way. I thought I knew every corner of him, the way he frowned when frustrated, how his eyes lit up when he saw me after a long day, the rare moments he let his guard down in front of me. I never doubted our compatibility. The early years of marriage were simple, maybe too simple. Our routines became rhythms. Jason leaving for work, me following the hum of my own electrical projects, evenings spent cooking dinner together or binge-watching shows while the world outside continued on its relentless pace. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We celebrated birthdays quietly, supported each other through job changes, and argued about trivial things like thermostat settings or grocery lists. Life felt manageable, predictable, and I liked it. I thought I was happy. Even our families played roles in shaping us. Jason's parents, ever concerned with appearances, occasionally reminded me that life could be bigger, better, more ambitious. I took it in stride, smiling politely, but secretly, I adored the quiet predictability of our small life. And Jason's siblings? Cale, my brother-in-law, teased and challenged, pushing me to question myself in harmless, yet sometimes uncomfortable ways. But those were the pressures we endured together, laughing afterward, reaffirming our bond. Then there were the milestones, our first apartment, the tiny garden we nurtured together, the late nights assembling IKEA furniture while bickering over instructions. Every memory was a thread weaving the fabric of our life. I thought I was building a fortress of trust and love, one small, tender moment at a time. I never suspected that the foundation could be shaken, not by tragedy, not by distance, but by someone from Jason's past returning to rewrite the rules of our life. And that's where the calm of our backstory meets the storm. Brianna Walsh's return, the echo of Jason's past choices, began threading tension through our carefully constructed life. Every mundane detail of our love, the coffee in the morning, the way our hands brushed on the couch, was suddenly tinged with uncertainty. I didn't know it yet, but our story was about to be tested in ways I never imagined, and the comfort I had known would crumble in the months to come. At first, it was subtle, almost invisible, like a shadow passing across the sunlight. Jason's mentions of Brianna started as casual, almost innocent anecdotes. "She's traveling to Europe next month," he'd say over breakfast, flipping an omelet with a distracted hand, or, "Brianna offered some advice about my investments." I nodded politely, forcing a smile, brushing off the tiny gnawing in my chest. I trusted him, always had. But the quiet unease began to creep in, unnoticed at first, like water seeping into a crack in a foundation. Then came the small signs I couldn't ignore. The way he lingered a little longer on her Instagram updates, the slight hesitation when answering questions about her, the way he smiled just a fraction too knowingly when she called or texted. I felt my heartbeat tighten, a subtle panic that made my stomach churn and my hands fidget whenever her name came up. It wasn't outright betrayal yet, but something in the air changed. There was a tension, a crack in the rhythm of our life that I hadn't felt before. I began to notice little things around the house. Jason's phone would buzz just a little too often, notifications silenced, screens angled away from view. Stories about Brianna slipped into our conversations, unbidden. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just catching up with an old friend. But when he started comparing our life to hers, my stomach dropped. "She's doing so many amazing things, Layla," he said casually one evening. "Makes you wonder what life could have been like, right?" I laughed, trying to mask the sudden surge of fear, the cold twist of doubt tightening around my chest. Then came the whispers from friends and family. A neighbor mentioned seeing Brianna at the coffee shop with Jason last week. Cale, my brother-in-law, hinted that Jason seemed distracted lately, but quickly apologized, realizing the awkwardness of his comment. Even the town gossip, subtle and insidious, began painting pictures I refused to imagine. "Jason's old flame is back. You know how it goes." My mind replayed each interaction, scrutinizing every smile, every glance, searching for a betrayal that wasn't yet visible. At night, alone, I lay awake listening to my own breathing, tracing the memories of our 8 years together. Was it all fragile? Had I been blind to the cracks in the walls I thought we built together? I felt fear, not of losing Jason, but of losing the foundation I'd trusted my life upon. My hands would clench the sheets as my thoughts spiraled. The easy comfort of our marriage began to feel distant, like sand slipping through my fingers, leaving only uncertainty and questions. I didn't confront him yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I observed, measured, tried to gather evidence from the mundane details of daily life, the way he laughed on phone calls, the sudden silences, the stories he shared that seemed slightly rehearsed. Every small shift became a seed of conflict in my mind, a tension that grew heavier by the day. And yet, beneath it all, I clung to trust, because the alternative, the thought that my life was unraveling, was unbearable. The first signs were subtle, but by now the air was charged. I could feel the storm approaching, the way the world tilts before lightning strikes, and I knew that soon everything I had built with Jason would be tested in a way I could neither predict nor control. The evening started like any other. Jason had promised dinner at home, a quiet night together to reconnect after a long week. I set the table, my hands trembling slightly even as I arranged the plates. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen, but it couldn't mask the tension I felt deep in my chest. Jason arrived, smelling faintly of cologne, subtle, familiar, but his eyes betrayed something different. There was a distance I hadn't noticed before, an unreadable shadow behind his gaze. We sat down, and at first, conversation was light, mundane. Work stories, small jokes, the easy banter we'd shared for years. I laughed, trying to believe everything was normal, trying to ignore the gnawing in my stomach. Then he put down his fork, leaned back, and met my eyes in a way that made my pulse stutter. "Layla," he began, voice soft, "I need to be honest about something. Something I've been thinking for a while." My chest tightened. I felt the room shrink around us, the walls of our home closing in. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were clenching the edge of the table. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "I think we got married too young. I think we both did. We never experienced being single, never dated other people, never figured out who we are independently." His words fell like stones into the calm waters of my mind. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. "Are you saying you want to see other people?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the tremor betrayed the fear rising in me. Jason shook his head slightly, but the corners of his mouth were tight. "No. I want a divorce." Time stopped. 8 years. 8 years of love, trust, nights spent dreaming together, gone in 3 simple words. My mind reeled, my stomach turned over as disbelief and horror collided. "Is this because of Brianna?" I managed, my throat tight, words tasting bitter. His face softened, almost apologetic. "It's not about anyone specific. It's about personal growth, about not wanting to wake up at 40 wondering what I missed, about finding out who I really am." I felt my heart constrict, squeezing as if it would break. "And you think leaving me is the answer?" I asked, voice rising slightly, the fear morphing into quiet rage. He shook his head again. "I can't fight for something you don't want, Layla, and I can't make you want it." I sat frozen, the fork in my hand suddenly heavy, useless. 8 years. Shared dreams. Our home, our routines, our quiet mornings and late nights. Gone. And yet part of me understood. I had seen too much pain in my life to fight someone who had already decided. Still, the betrayal cut deep. I could see it now. The subtle shifts, the lingering glances, the stories he told with a hint of longing for a life that wasn't ours. He stood, hesitation in every movement, as if he too were shocked by the finality of his words. I didn't reach for him. I didn't beg. I just felt the ground shift beneath me, the familiar floor of my life giving way to uncertainty and heartbreak. That night, Jason moved out, and with him went the fragile stability I had taken for granted, leaving me standing alone in a house that suddenly felt vast and empty. The storm had begun. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but my mind was a hurricane. I wandered from room to room, tracing the outlines of memories. The couch where we'd watched our first movies together, the kitchen where he'd laughed at my terrible attempts at cooking, the bedroom where 8 years of intimacy and trust had been built. Every corner whispered his absence. Every shadow a reminder that our life, the one I had trusted completely, had been erased. I sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping the sheets until my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to escape. I thought of our first date, the way he'd smiled shyly across the coffee shop table, the small gestures that had made me believe in love. And now he was gone, or rather, he had chosen to leave, and Brianna Walsh was the reason, the catalyst that had cracked open the life we built. My breaths came shallow, quick, uneven, and I could feel the nausea of betrayal twist in my stomach. The next morning, I confronted him again, though my voice trembled. Jason, how could you? 8 years, and you just decide I'm not enough? My words were sharp, trembling with a mixture of pain and disbelief. He looked at me, sadness flickering in his eyes. Layla, it's not that you're not enough. It's that I need to find out who I am. I never did, and I can't do that with us together. I laughed bitterly, a sound I barely recognized as mine. And Brianna has nothing to do with it? His pause was long, too long, and I knew the answer before he spoke. It's complicated. She just reminded me of what I haven't tried, what I haven't experienced. Complicated. A word that felt like a knife slicing through everything I had believed. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make him feel a fraction of the chaos consuming me. Instead, I sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words pressing down, crushing the warmth out of the room. Days passed. I walked through life like a ghost, performing the motions of daily routines but feeling nothing. The coffee I poured, the lights I fixed, the small interactions with neighbors, all felt hollow. My friends reached out, concerned, offering advice and comfort, but their words barely penetrated the fog around me. I found myself replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment of intimacy, searching desperately for clues I had missed. And yet, beneath the anger and betrayal, a small, stubborn seed of clarity grew. I realized I couldn't force someone to love me, couldn't argue someone into choosing what they didn't want. I thought of my parents, their bitter divorce, the wasted years of trying to hold on to someone who had already decided to leave. I understood, with painful clarity, that my role was not to beg, not to persuade, but to survive, to rebuild. I started journaling in the quiet hours of the night, scribbling down the torrent of thoughts that raged in me. Anger, sorrow, disbelief, and a reluctant understanding mingled on the pages. I traced memories of our early love, of Jason's smiles and gentle hands, trying to preserve the good while accepting the loss. It hurt more than I could have anticipated, but within that hurt, a strange resilience began to form. I would not crumble. I would not vanish into the shadows of what once was. Jason had chosen his path, and I had to choose mine. The following weeks were unbearable, and yet life refused to pause. Jason's absence left an echo in every room, in every routine I had once taken for granted. I would wake up expecting to hear his soft snore from the bedroom or the scrape of his boots in the hallway. But there was nothing. Just silence, and a house that felt too big, too empty. The quiet was oppressive, pressing against my temples like a vice, making my thoughts spin faster than I could control. Then came the subtle invasions. Friends, family, even neighbors started questioning me. "Are you really okay, Layla?" they asked, concern laced with judgment. Their eyes would flick to the empty side of the bed, the unlit living room, as if silence itself betrayed my inadequacy. I smiled politely, nodded, but inside I seethed. Everyone had opinions. Everyone had a theory. And yet no one had felt the precise, gut-wrenching ache of having a life you thought unshakable ripped from beneath you. Jason's family added pressure, their words sharp and veiled with concern. "Maybe you should have tried harder, Layla," his mother said one evening, voice dripping with what felt like accusation. 8 years doesn't just disappear. You should fight." I wanted to scream, to shake her, to tell her that love isn't about fighting someone into staying. But I swallowed my words, let the silence speak instead. I didn't need validation from those who had always looked at me like a guest in their family. And Jason himself, his messages, brief and polite, cut into me more than his absence ever could. Updates about Brianna, glimpses of their life together, filtered through social media and whispered rumors. Parties, fancy dinners, photos showing them smiling, living the life he claimed he wanted. My stomach churned with nausea, and yet I couldn't look away. It was a twisted magnet, drawing me into a vortex of jealousy, grief, and disbelief. I found myself questioning everything I had ever believed about our marriage. Had I truly known him? Had I truly known myself? I replayed every fight, every smile, every quiet morning, searching for signs I had missed, for clues to explain how our world had crumbled. My friends tried to console me, suggesting distractions, work, social outings, new hobbies, but I found little relief. Every attempt to escape was shadowed by the omnipresent reality. Jason had chosen someone else, someone who reminded him of life outside of what we had built together. And yet, beneath the suffocating grief, something stronger began to stir. My anger grew sharper, focused, not on fleeting whims or petty jealousies, but on the injustice of being treated as expendable, as someone whose love could be cast aside for curiosity and ambition. I started exercising, not for vanity, but to reclaim the physical and mental space that had been ceded to heartbreak. I picked up extra electrical jobs, forcing my mind into the rhythm of work, grounding myself against the storm that threatened to swallow me whole. The townspeople whispered, of course, half-pitied me, casting sympathetic glances, murmuring about the poor woman who had been left for wealth and charm. The other half respected my composure, marveled at the restraint I showed, the dignity I maintained while my life unraveled around me. Their judgment and gossip only fueled my determination. I wouldn't crumble. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't fight for someone who had already chosen another path. Brianna Walsh's shadow loomed everywhere, a constant reminder of what Jason believed he desired. But I felt the first hints of clarity, an understanding that my life, my choices, my dignity were mine to reclaim, irrespective of the chaos Brianna had stirred. And in that simmering storm, I realized that the next months would not just be about surviving heartbreak. They would be about reclaiming every fragment of myself that Jason had taken for granted. It hit me hardest one rainy evening, the kind where the sky feels heavy, pressing down on your shoulders until you can barely breathe. I had been going through the motions all day, work, errands, the mechanical rhythm of survival, but that night the walls closed in. I sat on the couch, rain tapping against the windows, a dull gray light casting shadows across the empty rooms. Everything we had built together felt like a fragile illusion, shattered beyond repair. My phone buzzed, and for a moment, hope flared. Maybe it was Jason, maybe it was a mistake, maybe anything. But it wasn't him. It was a social media notification, a photo of him and Brianna, smiling under bright lights at some lavish party. The image burned into my mind. Designer clothes, champagne, laughter. I knew wasn't for me. My chest tightened, each breath sharp and ragged. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, suffocating wave, and for the first time I wondered if I could survive this. I wandered to the bedroom, tracing the outlines of our past on the walls, on the furniture, on the photographs I hadn't yet packed away. My hands shook as I touched them, fingertips brushing over memories, ghosts of happiness that now felt like betrayal. The kitchen echoed with emptiness. The floorboards groaned under the weight of my despair. I felt unmoored, untethered, as if the life I had known had been erased while I blinked. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to feel something that wasn't this numb, crushing grief. But my voice was trapped behind the walls of my own panic. Tears blurred my vision, falling onto the bedspread, onto photographs, onto letters Jason had once written me. Each droplet felt like a confession of failure, a silent acknowledgement that 8 years of love, devotion, and shared dreams could be discarded so easily. I thought of my friends, of my family, of everyone who had told me to stay strong, to move on. Their words felt hollow. How could they understand the depth of this emptiness? How could anyone understand the betrayal of being chosen against, replaced by someone else who reminded him of possibilities you could never provide? I felt smaller, insignificant, a ghost drifting through the remnants of my own life. Hours passed. I stayed in that haze of grief, rocking slightly on the bed, my fingers clutching the sheets until they were soaked with tears. I questioned everything, my worth, my judgment, my ability to love and be loved. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was an existential collapse. The realization that someone I had given my life to could decide without hesitation that my presence was no longer necessary. And yet, in the deepest pit of despair, I felt a strange clarity. I realized that while Jason had chosen another path, I was still here. I still had a body that could heal, a mind that could fight, and a heart that, though broken, could learn to beat again. The darkness didn't lift, not entirely, but a tiny flicker of resolve appeared, a fragile understanding that I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could decide what to do next. I lay there through the night, rain dripping from the eaves, listening to the rhythm of my own shaky breaths. Somewhere beneath the suffocating weight of loss, a spark of determination began to glow. I didn't know how I would emerge from this darkness, but I knew one thing: I would. It started with a phone call I never expected. A soft, hesitant voice, one I had heard countless times in laughter and arguments alike. "Layla, it's me." "Brianna?" No, it was Jason. My chest tightened, but I held the phone, forcing my voice steady. "Jason, what is it?" He stammered, as if the words themselves were painful to produce. "You need to know everything about Brianna, about what's been happening. It's not what it seems." My pulse quickened. A mix of dread and curiosity surged through me. I listened, each word cutting sharper than any betrayal I had imagined. Brianna's life, the lavish dinners, the fancy trips, the sparkling smiles, was a facade. The Tesla, the designer clothes, the extravagant parties, it was all borrowed, rented, fabricated. Jason's voice wavered as he explained. The fortune she flaunted, the investments she boasted about, even the house where she celebrated her success, all lies. She had been manipulating him, showing him a dream that never existed, an image crafted to lure admiration and trust. I sat down heavily, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Anger, disbelief, and relief collided inside me. He had chosen her over me for a dream, a fantasy that was never real. My life, my devotion, had been discarded for illusions. And yet, that very revelation shifted something in me. I realized, with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks, that the power had always been mine. Jason had left me, yes, but not because I wasn't enough. He had been seduced by glittering lies, and now the mask was falling. The moment was mine. I could confront him, demand answers, or simply step back and watch the consequences unfold. And for the first time, I felt free from the desperation that had gripped me since he walked away. When I finally saw him in person, I was calm. No pleading, no tears, no begging, just steady eyes, hands relaxed at my sides, voice measured. "Jason, I know the truth now. Brianna isn't who she seemed to be." He nodded, shame flickering across his face. I didn't know. I thought—" "You thought what?" I interrupted gently, yet firmly. "That her fantasy life was more real than what we built together? 8 years, Jason. 8 years of trust, love, and shared life, and you let a mirage convince you otherwise?" He flinched, but I didn't relent. "Layla, I'm sorry," he whispered. But his apology felt empty to me now. Not because I didn't want to hear it, but because I had already moved beyond needing it. In that confrontation, I felt something I hadn't in months. Control, clarity, power. I didn't need to chase him, argue, or plead. The truth had dismantled his choice. The fantasy that seduced him crumbled, revealing the emptiness beneath. And in that revelation, I understood that I could choose my next steps, my future, independently. I walked away from the conversation with a quiet strength, my spine straight, my head high. I didn't need him to see my value. I knew it. The betrayal that once felt like a crushing weight now rested in the past, transformed into a lesson in self-respect and clarity. Jason had made his choices, and I had made mine. For the first time in months, I felt the beginnings of peace. Not happiness, yet, but the calm understanding that I had survived the worst, seen the truth, and emerged stronger. The turning point wasn't just in his confession. It was in my recognition that I no longer needed his approval, his love, or his validation. I had my own life, my own path, and for the first time, it felt wide open. The days that followed were surreal. The town whispered endlessly, half in shock, half in schadenfreude. Brianna Walsh's world unraveled with astonishing speed. The mansion, the luxury cars, the designer wardrobes, all disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Jason had sent me updates, not because he wanted my pity, but because the truth was unavoidable. The woman he had left me for, the life he thought he desired, was built entirely on lies, fraud, and borrowed fantasies. The social media posts stopped abruptly. Parties vanished. Photos of her smiling in front of exotic backdrops were deleted, leaving only fragments of a story that never existed. The people who had celebrated her success, friends, distant acquaintances, even family members, suddenly went silent. The whispers that had once surrounded me now shifted to her. Yet, unlike before, I didn't feel vindication. I felt a calm, detached clarity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, and it was hers to face. Jason, for his part, was crushed, not just by the exposure of Brianna's lies, but by the realization of the choices he had made. He reached out, hesitant, shame-coding every word. Layla, I never imagined it would be like this. I was wrong. I listened, my hands folded in my lap, the rhythm of my own steady breathing, a reminder that I was no longer tethered to his remorse. I know, Jason, I said finally, my voice calm but resolute. You chose to leave, and that choice is yours to live with. I won't erase it, and I won't fix it. This is the consequence of decisions, not something I bear responsibility for. The town watched, of course. Some were impressed by my composure, the strength with which I navigated the aftermath. Others still whispered, questioning why I didn't take him back, why I didn't intervene. But I understood what they could not, the difference between compassion and obligation. I could feel sorry for him, and even for Brianna, but I was under no obligation to rescue them from the consequences of their actions. I began to rebuild. Small steps at first, fixing up my apartment, investing in work projects, reconnecting with friends who had been overshadowed by the drama of the past months. Each day was deliberate. Each decision, a reminder that I existed for myself, not for someone else's approval. The energy I had spent on heartbreak transformed into determination, focus, and resilience. And then, a new chapter began. Paul, my friend, a teacher who had no connection to this small-town drama, entered my life in a quiet, grounding way. He had met me not as Jason's wife, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a person worthy of his time, attention, and care. Her presence reminded me that the world held stability, simplicity, and genuine choice. Unlike Jason, Paul didn't need to be convinced or persuaded. He simply chose to be part of my life. The contrast was striking. One person had left me for illusions, for wealth and glamour that didn't exist. The other offered me trust, presence, and steady companionship. And I realized, with a clarity that brought both relief and pride, that I didn't need validation from those who had left me. My life, my happiness, and my choices were mine to command. Brianna's downfall, Jason's remorse, the whispers of the town, they all faded into the background, like a storm passing over a landscape. I remained, grounded and resolute, having survived the chaos, recognized the truth, and reclaimed my power. The fallout wasn't just external, it was internal, a reckoning that allowed me to see my own strength, my own worth, and the life I was ready to embrace without apology. It was a quiet morning when I realized just how far I had come. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting the apartment in soft gold, and for the first time in months, the heaviness that had clung to me was gone. No phone notifications from Jason, no whispers of Brianna's downfall, just silence, and it felt like home. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, the warmth of the mug in my hands. Paul had texted me a simple, "Good morning," nothing extravagant, nothing demanding, just presence. It was a gentle reminder that life could be ordinary and yet deeply fulfilling. The contrast between the chaos I had endured and this calm was stark. 8 years of devotion, heartbreak, betrayal, and the unraveling of illusions had brought me here, to clarity, to peace, to strength. I thought about Jason. I thought about Brianna. I felt a pang of sorrow, yes, but not for myself. I felt sorry for them, caught in the consequences of their choices. And yet, I was no longer responsible for repairing what had been broken. I had learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot love someone into choosing you, and you should never have to convince someone that you are enough. The right person will see your worth and choose you, not as a last resort, not after the fantasy falls apart, but because they want to be with you in your reality. Walking through the city streets later that morning, I felt light. The small apartment, My modest routines, the work I loved, the friends who had stayed by my side, they were mine, and they were enough. Paul and I met for coffee at a corner cafe, laughter spilling easily between us, the simplicity of our connection grounding me in ways the past years never had. Here was partnership not built on illusion, but on choice, trust, and shared life. I realized that happiness doesn't always arrive with fanfare. It doesn't need grand gestures, luxury, or validation from others. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the steady presence of someone who values you for exactly who you are. Sometimes it comes in the reclamation of yourself, in the rebuilding of a life that no one else can define. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and the unraveling of my world. I had stared into the darkest moments of despair, and yet I had survived. I had learned that grace is not the same as responsibility for another's mistakes. Compassion does not require sacrifice of your own well-being. Love is not about convincing, but about choosing and being chosen. Sitting back at home that evening, I sipped my tea and watched the sunlight fade. I felt the quiet hum of life around me, ordinary yet profoundly satisfying. The past 8 years, the loss, the revelations, all of it had led me here. I didn't need to reclaim what was lost. I had reclaimed myself. And in that reclamation, I had discovered something far more enduring than any illusion of wealth or glamour, my own strength, my own choice, and my own life. Life moved forward, steadily, quietly, beautifully. And I finally understood. The person who truly chooses you will never need to be convinced.